Support for User Defenders is provided by Adobe XD. Adobe XD reimagines how designers create user experiences for websites, mobile, and more. Try it free at userdefenders.com/XD.
We ship this garbage and they don't like it. What's wrong? And that's when I go, there's no such thing as UX design. If that happened, it's because you weren't actually doing what you were supposed to do. Because this stuff, it's hard, but it's not any harder than engineering, and engineering seems to get done. Interaction design, to me, is about knowing who your user is. That's a huge problem right there. Understanding what their desired end state is, another huge problem. And then understanding why they want to get there, another huge problem. All of these are enormous problems that take a lot of training and a lot of skill to get to.
Welcome to the User Defenders Podcast, where we interview UX superheroes who fight for the users in order to inspire and equip you to do the same. And now, here's your host, Jason Ogle.
Greetings, User Defenders. Welcome to part 1 of episode 53. I'm your host, Jason Ogle. I had the immense privilege and honor of speaking to the original user defender himself, Alan Cooper. I'll be honest with you, Defenders, this was the longest bio I've read so far, and for good reason. Alan has a career in user experience, which wasn't technically called that back then. It was more software design. But he's one of the originals, folks. He was there. I was probably an embryo or the strongest swimmer when he was creating the building blocks of what would become Visual Basic that he later sold to Bill Gates himself in 1988. So his career spans over 40 years. Alan was so gracious with his time. He spent probably close to 3 hours with me. And ironically, some of the first portion of it was spent troubleshooting bad software. So imagine that, like trying to hold a conversation with the software alchemist himself. And then, of course, there's bugs with your Skype software, the new update. So I had to downgrade. It was just really funny. I'm talking to the author of The Inmates Are Running the Asylum about Skype's software debacle. Anyway, we finally got that going. Alan was patient enough to hang on for me while I did that. And this is going to be a 2-part episode because he spent an additional 2 hours of his time talking to me, and I'm just so grateful for that. And there's so much good content and stuff that came out of this conversation. So it's going to be 2 parts. So this is part 1, and I will also, I guess, kind of warn you or maybe throw a disclaimer out there, Defenders. As you know, any of you who've been listening for any length of time, you know that I try to make this a family-friendly show, and I try to put a little, kapow over any expletive words that come out in the conversations. But this is the first time I'm going to actually not do that. So be forewarned, if you have children in the car listening, just kind of be aware of that. And the reason I did that is, well, for example, have any of you seen Scared Straight? Do you remember that? If you're an older person like me, back in I think in the 80s or something, early 80s, there was this TV show. They actually put it on TV, and it was called Scared Straight. And it was basically inmates talking to young folks who were kind of, edge cases or trouble cases that seemed to show trends of possibly having a criminal lifestyle or behavior pattern. So it's these criminals in jail, so a lot of them doing life for murder and things like that. But anyway, this was the first time, I think, on TV that, and this is early, again, there was so much more sensitivity to censorship back then, but they did not edit any of it. They didn't edit any swear words or anything, and it's because if they had, it would have taken away from the impact of what was being shared. And so all that to say, I feel like in this case, talking to Alan Cooper, I feel like I needed to leave these things in because he doesn't, as you know, anybody who knows Alan Cooper has been following his work, he doesn't use swear words just for the sake of using swear words like maybe a lot of comedians do, for example. When he does it, it's to emphasize a really passionate point that he's trying to make. So I feel like in this case, I'm not going to do that. So again, long story short, be aware of that. So that's it. And for the intro, please enjoy this episode. This is part one of my unforgettable interview with Alan Cooper. Alan Cooper wants to be a good ancestor. That is why he is the co-creator of the Ancestry Thinking Lab. It's an organization dedicated to finding and teaching practical methods for assuring that technical products behave in an ethical manner. This is just his latest effort in a long career as an inventor and thought leader in the world of software. In 2017, Alan and his wife Sue sold Cooper, the company they founded 25 years earlier. It was the very first interaction design consulting firm. Early on, he established the basic design methods that are used across the industry today and helped to popularize the notion that digital technology shouldn't terrorize its human users, and I love that. In particular, his invention, Design Personas, is almost universally used in the field. He shared his tools, knowledge, and experience in 2 best-selling books, still in print and widely referenced. The company's new owners are a European design firm, Design It, owned by Wipro, a tech company based in Bangalore, India. In 1988, Alan invented a dynamically extensible visual programming tool and sold it to Bill Gates, who released it to the world as Visual Basic, arguably the most successful programming language ever. This is how Alan earned the sobriquet, if I said that right, the father of Visual Basic. He started his first software company in 1976 and produced what has been called the first serious business software for microcomputers. In 2017, Alan was named a fellow of the Computer History Museum in Silicon Valley, California. That's awesome. In 1998, he was named a visionary by Silicon Valley Forum, and in 1995, Bill Gates named him the first Windows pioneer. In 2011, Cooper left Silicon Valley to live on a 50-acre former dairy farm in the rolling hills north of San Francisco, where he continues to advocate for more humane technology. And a fun fact about Alan is he's a former aircraft pilot and a sheep and chicken farmer. Welcome to User Defenders, Alan. I am super excited to have you on the show today.
Jason, it's my pleasure to be here. I just want to say that the Ancestry Thinking Lab is kind of an aspirational creation at this point. What we're hoping is that some large organization will come along and fund us. Right now, it's sort of the wild-eyed dream of my colleague Renato Verdugo and myself. But it's clearly something that the industry is wrestling with right now and needs help on, and we're trying to help.
Yeah, and I am very interested in learning more about that, and I have a feeling our conversation will veer more into exactly what ancestry thinking is. So I'm excited to learn more about that as well.
Cool.
So let's just kick things off. I've got a lot of questions for you, and I just can't wait to get into this with you. So, Alan, in a recent tweet, you said something really interesting and maybe I'd say pretty provocative, and that's not alien to you, of course. You definitely don't mince words, and I really appreciate that about you. So you said something, though, that kind of perked me up a little bit and made me curious, because I don't know if I agree with this, but I'd love to hear your answer. You said there are no such things as UX, or there is no such thing as UX design. What did you mean by that?
I meant I was angry and frustrated, and I was venting. And I'm sorry, I do this stuff. Twitter is the stream of consciousness broadcasting machine, and sometimes I broadcast with my inner voice, and I shouldn't. Here's the thing: is that to me, interaction design it's a terminology hell, and you can give any definition you want to any of these words. I'm not arguing over the terminology. Oh, by the way, I've written blog posts about this because this topic comes up over and over and over again. What I'm railing against is people who saying, I'm a user, therefore I can do user design. They're just saying all it takes is a little empathy, a little care, and some common sense. And that's bullshit. It doesn't take empathy and care and common sense. It takes training and expertise and talent and experience. and to be an interaction designer. Interaction designer happens to be the term that I prefer. Okay. And and the term that I don't prefer is user experience design. And so whenever I'm angry at lightweights, mailing it in, not actually doing the hard work of designing good software and fighting the good fight to get good interaction design, good technology behavior out into the field, what I do is I of course attribute that to user experience design. And whenever I see really wonderful craft, very well done and well positioned in the industry, I go, well, that's interaction design. So you have to understand that's my prejudice. But what I mean by that is I just see so much of moving buttons around on the screen and putting nice wood grain side borders onto your skeuomorphic application instead of actually understanding your users and what they're trying to do and helping them do it through good design. And so that was me. It was a cry for help. And I did it again just the other day. And then I just have to smack myself. I go, why do I do this? Why do I, but what happens is I see people going, we ship this garbage and they don't like it. What's wrong? And that's when I go, there's no such thing as UX design. Because if that happened, it's because you weren't actually doing what you were supposed to do. Because this stuff, it's hard, but it's not any harder than engineering, and engineering seems to get done. The problem is that a lot of this stuff doesn't get. Here's the thing. Interaction design to me is about knowing who your user is. That's a huge problem right there. Understanding what their desired end state is, another huge problem. And then understanding why they want to get there, another huge problem. All of these are enormous problems that take a lot of training and a lot of skill to get to. And in some domains, they're really complex and difficult. And, but very much that's about being user-centered, okay? But so much of what is being taught in schools today, so much of what passes for interaction design is actually a designer-centric practice, not a user-centered practice. It's about moving Post-its around on the board. It's about coming up with really creative and interesting concepts and arguing over the relative merits, and then, doing A/B rolling between, one designer's cool concept versus another designer's cool concept. And it's not about your cool concepts. It's about understanding what really, clunky vision that the user might have in their head and understanding it. So this is what I rail against when I talk about that, when I say there's no UX design, because what UX design means to me is it means being designer centric. It means it's about your quirky glasses and your tattoos and not about your users.
So, and I appreciate that answer, Alan. I think there's a balance though too, like as far as empathy goes, I feel like some of the best design that we've seen has been a result also of having the designer having a lot of empathy for the users of what they're designing. And I always think of Doug Dietz, who designed GE's Discovery MRI, right? Using design thinking. And, and it's, of course, there's a lot of buzzwords in our field too. And I know you're all too well aware of that, Alan. UX has become a buzzword. Like you said, a lot of us think that UX is really just moving pixels around on a screen. And we know, it's certainly a lot more than that. But there are times when we have to do that too. And we're not going to change our titles every time we have to do production work, right? So there's kind of there's a debacle, I think, here. And I think user experience means something different to everybody. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, user experience means something different to everybody. Yeah, I agree. And so I don't know why why do I rage against the light? I mean, it's like it's like me yelling at the sunrise. It's I call it I've noticed this phenomenon over my many, many years in the tech industry. And what it is that with each new advance of technology, more powerful tool sets that come generation by generation, what happens is the old guys, like back in the 60s, there were the guys who programmed computers with jumper cables. And then when the guys came in who could program them with ones and zeros, the jumper cable guys looked down their noses and said, "Oh my God, they're lightweights. They're using bits." And then came the assembler language guys, and all the 0 and 1 guys who used to be flipping switches on the front panel of the computer went, "Oh my God, lightweights." And so I call it the invasion of the lightweights. Each generation, looks at this new generation. It's like I did the bulk of my work in C. C was my programming language, and it's a manly language, And so when the basic programmers came along, I looked down my nose at them. I said, "Oh God, they're lightweights," And
you're shaving with an axe.
They're shaving with a triple safety razor. I mean, they don't.
And you're shaving
really,
with an axe, though. You are.
I'm shaving with an axe, exactly. A dull axe, a rusty dull. I know. It's the walking through the snow, uphill both ways when I was a kid kind of thing. The invasion of the lightweights, and so but there's a kernel of truth to that, because the fact is that a lot of young designers leave school having learned designer-centric techniques, which is about prototyping and testing, and which is the generative work comes from the designer. Yes, it's bounced off of users, but bouncing your ideas off users is not the same thing as generating your ideas from the needs of the user. And words like empathy, to me, are excuses for a lack of discipline. It's like somebody who says, "Well, I don't really," it's like a welder saying, "Well, I don't know how to get good penetration on these welds, but isn't this sculpture beautiful?" Well, yeah, that's a beautiful sculpture. But the thing about the demands on a sculpture are different than the demands on, say, a submarine or a spacecraft, or a vehicle, that has to travel at high speeds. And I think our software doesn't need to be, I mean, aesthetically pleasing is nice, but I don't think that's the critical element. I think the critical element is that the welds have to be sound. And what I'm seeing more and more is a kind of a retrograde movement away from good interaction design. I mean, the errors that I see in software today were errors that were clearly pointed out and supposedly vanquished 20, 25 years ago. And they're coming back. And I think they're coming back because young people are coming into the industry. It's the invasion of the lightweights. And they're taught that if you've got empathy for the user, if you can feel for them while you're moving your Post-it notes around, that's good enough. And to me, I say that's not good enough.
So how do I'm just thinking about this, and I love that, the invasion of the lightweights. I'm an older guy myself, and I've seen a lot of change in the industry. I started doing this like right after the World Wide Web really started exploding publicly. So I've seen a lot too. And I tend to have my kind of like, that SNL skit, "Back when I was young, we did it. This is how we did it. And we liked it,
Yeah.
Like get off my lawn, like I tend to have those tendencies as well. But I've also seen like a lot of, and the cool thing about the invasion of the lightweights, that whole concept is, grit is important in this work, right? And I feel like a lot of us older guys, we have more grit maybe because we've been through a lot. We've seen a lot. We used to do things a lot harder. It used to be a lot harder to do things, right? Like you said, the jumper cables versus just pulling a keyboard up. So I feel like the challenge with that is that a lot of the folks that grizzled folks that are in this field, would you say that a lot of these folks are having trouble holding on to their jobs? Are they having trouble getting jobs in this field because of kind of we've always done it that way? And maybe not willing to, kind of change some of the old habits, so to speak, and innovate forward and jump into kind of how things are done now?
No, I don't. I mean, I see. I see it the opposite. I mean, I do see that the grizzled old veterans are having trouble, but I think that's because there's a lot of ageism in Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley is not a place; it's a state of mind. I mean, the Silicon Valley is the tech world all over. But I actually see it different. Is that if you look at Apple software is a delightful example. I mean, I used to use Microsoft as an example all the time. I don't much anymore, just because they're kind of on the trailing edge. But Apple has really gone this trajectory of understanding that putting up silly dialog boxes and hiding information is not a good thing. But as they've gone generation upon generation of designer at Apple, the later versions, the more recent versions of their programs are filled with all that old cruft that Apple got rid of 15 years ago, and it's coming back. And what they're doing is they're committing the sins that they called out as sins years ago, and they're recapitulating this same crap. And so, to me, I don't believe it's the old guys reasserting themselves. I think this is the young guys who are in fact not taught how to do interaction design, because what they're doing is intuitive, okay? And intuition is an incredibly shitty tool for interaction design, because your intuition tells you that if you do an action that is highly dislocating, like deleting a file, what you do is you put up a confirmation box. You say, are you sure you want to delete that file? That's what your intuition tells you. But we've pretty much proven conclusively over many years of software development that that's a really crappy solution that doesn't solve the problem, slows everybody down. It's really wrong and bad, and that isn't how you do it. And yet more and more I see products putting up dialog boxes for actions like that, or even for innocent little actions like, are you sure you want to change the name of that file? And we know that's wrong. And so where does that come from? I really think it's coming from designers who've never been taught the fundamentals. And there's so many more designers working today at product companies than there were 20 years ago. I mean, 20 years ago, it was a fight to get rid of confirmation dialog boxes, because there were engineering and marketing people saying, well, that's how we've always done it. And people expect that. Well, what will they do if they don't get a confirmation box? And we finally won that battle, and the confirmation boxes went away. Now they're coming back. This is not the old folks. It's the old folks fought that war.
Yeah, well, we talked about interaction design, and we're going to continue to, but I put something out on Twitter recently, and it was a quote. I've been reading your wonderful inmates are running the asylum, and I got to tell you, and I'm not trying to inflate your head at all, but you were so ahead of your time when you wrote this. I mean, the stuff you're talking about, I'm reading it now, I don't know, nearly 20 years later, and the stuff you're talking about now is as relevant, if not even more relevant now than it was then. So much emphasis on business and just stuff that a lot of us kind of green web designers weren't even thinking about at the time. But I put this quote out there that I just loved, and it got a little bit of a little attention there. It's just, he said, like putting an Armani suit on Attila the Hun, interface design only tells you how to dress up an existing behavior. And My question is, you put a lot of emphasis on interaction design, even, with the first question. Now you'd prefer to call it interaction design, even more than, far more than like UI or UX design. I kind of understand more why you do that, but I guess I want to ask you, why do you do that? And also kind of the piggyback question to that is, what can you tell our defenders listening who are newer designers? They're younger folks maybe, and they are kind of wondering, how do I, as I said in the tweet, how do I consider the behavior and interaction of the product first? What are kind of some best practices? I know that, like you said, this is a lot of experiences. You can't encapsulate it with one answer, but how do you direct some of these folks who are wondering, how can I design the best experience and consider, instead of just dressing up a pig, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, thank you, by the way.
Absolutely.
The book was published in 99, but I wrote it in 98, so it has been 20 years.
Wow. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. It's, I know I've looked at the book. I mean, the publisher has said, don't you want to update it? And I look at it and I go, the examples are pretty old but the points are the same. I don't see a lot of difference. There's a few things I changed. But yeah, it's still a real thing. Look, when 25, 20, 30 years ago, when I and a few other people started to shout, from the trenches, hey, it's not just engineering and it's not just sales. There's something else. It's about, there was the academia who was saying, well, the user matters, but the academia was studying how bloody the users were. They weren't proactively saying, how do we make the users less bloody? And that's what the practitioners like me were doing, is we were saying there's got to be a way around this. And we weren't taking anybody's job away from them. What we were doing was we were saying, there's a job here that doesn't exist, okay? And so practitioners of today have a very different challenge, because everybody knows that the way the product presents itself is a thing. Back then, it wasn't even a thing. We were saying, hey, the way the product presents itself has to be considered as a unique thing over and above functionality and, getting rid of bugs and over and above, selling features to clients. But today, young people, the same invasion of the lightweights, they not only have to fight for the rights of the user, but they have to fight for their own rights. And there are a lot of people who are saying, well, no, this is the way I want the product to look and to behave because I have opinions on that. And there's just an enormous amount of misinformation out there about how it's done. So to me, interaction design is about being user-centered. But user-centered is not to be user-centered, you can't sit in your office and be user-centered. You have to actually go out and watch your user actually work in situ. You have to see what they do. You have to watch what they do, and you have to study and learn. And this does not mean going out with a questionnaire. And this does not mean, synthesizing a bunch of stuff in the lab and then using users as guinea pigs. It's about really understanding what their primary motivations are. Pretty much everybody uses your product because they have a goal that is in parallel to the goal of your product, but it's not the same. And so what you have to do is not look at what your product is doing, because then you see the parallel path. What you have to do is you have to look and see what the user's doing. And then you can see how your parallel path can get closer to the real path. And way too much stuff out there I see is is about the expression of the designer's vision. And I don't give a rat's ass about the designer's vision. The same way I don't give a rat's ass about the engineer's, we could have the program do this, or we could have it do that, or we could add this feature. That would be cool. I mean, that was the battle that I fought 25 years ago. But now I'm fighting the battle of, well, I think it should be on the left-hand side. It's like, I don't give a shit what you think it should be. The user doesn't give a shit where you think it should be. What matters is where should it be, not what you think. And the way you figure out where it should be, I mean, when you start actually looking at the behavior of products and how people interact with them, what you find usually is that whatever crap you've put there, the users don't want. What the users tend to want is that you, is not that you change the controls from a menu item to a button or to a direct manipulation, but generally what they want you to do is change the entire mental model to be one that's more consistent with the way they conceive of the problem they're working with. So if you're doing back office software, you conceive of things in terms of the paper flow that has to go for auditing purposes, but that's not how people who are working in the trenches in business conceive of it. They go, oh my God, I've got to get approval to this person.
Yeah, I love the sentiment, Alan, and I agree with you as far as getting out of your seat. And that's probably seems like one of the biggest challenges for a lot of designers. I raise my hand first, because we can make a lot of assumptions, and sometimes we can lean on design patterns maybe too much, and because there are intuitive design patterns, thankfully, that have obviously evolved over the years, but generally a lot of users have gotten used to seeing things in certain locations. Would you say, I mean, because you were saying the user doesn't give a crap where the thing is, but maybe they do. If somebody, if you forget to put a back arrow on an app, that's a problem, of course. Like, how important are design patterns as well in this process for interaction design?
Well, that's not interaction design. That's interface design. And patterns are vital.
Okay.
But we were talking earlier about Autodesk. I'm wrestling with Fusion 360, trying to learn it. I bought a 3D printer, and I'm really excited and eager and enthusiastic to learn parametric CAD. And so I'm submitting myself to the torture of ascending the learning cliff of Autodesk's products. But the thing about it is their product, 30 years ago was a 2D product, and then they went 3D by maintaining this model that what you're doing is you're drawing a blueprint, but then you're sort of extruding it into 3D space. And it's not at all clear that that's the proper model. Now, they have all kinds of interface gadgets and idioms and stuff, and some of them are really good and some of them are really bad. But that isn't the point. The point is that do CAD professionals think in terms of blueprints and extruding them into 3D space? There's no doubt that AutoCAD has a huge multi-billion-dollar investment in that vision. Okay, but it's not at all clear to me. And there are also many, many hundreds of thousands of mechanical engineers out there who have also made the investment to learn this way of thinking. Okay, but is that the right way of thinking? That is what interaction designers do. They ask and answer questions like that. They don't talk about, at a certain point, yeah, they move buttons around on the screen, but that's not the essence of what interaction design is. The essence of interaction design is, how does the user think about this, and are we presenting it in a way that's consistent with that? And this is why this is why I make angry tweets. because they talk about user experience, and what they're really talking about is whether it should be a hamburger menu or a falafel menu or a tossed salad menu, and they're not talking about users' mental models. They're not talking about how people conceive of stuff.
You see, that's fascinating.
Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
There's billions and billions of dollars expended on electronic health records. Okay? And they're all a giant waste. And everybody suffers through crappy electronic health records. Okay? All the doctors, all the back office techs at clinics, all the individual people who are trying to, go to the hospital or go to the clinic and see their doctor. They all sweat this crap, okay? One of the fundamental misconceptions about electronic health records is that they belong to the health provider. And this has been metastasized by laws and regulations, okay? Somebody needs to come along and say, no, they belong to the individual. They belong to the patient. They belong to the person. And the person, instead of the person giving the care provider permission to share their health records with a specialist, instead the individual person should own and possess their own health records and should loan the records to the healthcare provider and give the healthcare provider permission to annotate them or modify them or add to them. Okay, now the thing is what happens is everybody looks at a suggestion like that and says, oh my God, but you'd have to build this and you'd have to build that and people would lose their stuff and how would you take care of it? Well, that's what we do right now anyway.
Right.
I mean,
we have a medical record on our iPhone. We have a medical history. Yeah.
Yeah, there's just mountains of crap that we have to go through, except at the bottom line, it's about healthcare providers owning those records. And what that does is that colors everything about healthcare records. So it's going to be equally hard work if the individual healthcare recipient owns those records, but it's going to flavor everything very differently, and it's going to empower the healthcare recipient rather than empowering the healthcare provider. And so this is what interaction design needs to do. Now, here's the thing: is it's really, really hard for an individual to stand up and make an assertion like that, because what you're doing is you're going against billions of dollars of sunk cost. Okay,
that's madness.
Yeah, but this is what I expect from a good interaction designer. I expect them to ask those big questions. I mean, the thing is, I don't expect an interaction designer to stand up and say, health records should belong to the patient and get health records to now belong to the patient. I don't expect that to happen, but I do expect them to stand up and say that. Because if enough of them stand up and say that over and over and over, people will begin to think about it. And at a certain point, somebody with money or clout or an idea of being, of innovating and being disruptive is going to come along and make that change and build a product that does that. And it's going to be hugely successful. And they're going to sweep through the industry and pick up all the marbles. It's going to be a great thing. But instead, what I see designers do is they don't think at that level. They don't work at that level. Instead, they think about, they don't question the idea of who owns the health records. Instead, they just spend all day wrestling with the problems that arise from the fact that the patient doesn't own their own records. Okay, I don't want to turn people into revolutionaries. I want to turn people into I want them to be aware of the shortcomings, and talk about the shortcomings. That's all. Because that's the start. That's how this stuff happens, is people begin to talk about it. And right now, this stuff is swept under the rug. People don't question models.
Design and build interactive prototypes, update artwork, and test your experiences, all without having to upload, sync, or jump back and forth between apps. Adobe XD is available for both Mac and PC and integrates with Adobe Creative Cloud libraries, meaning that no matter what your team configuration, XD has you covered. And now you can get Adobe XD for free. Just go to userdefenders.com/XD to learn more. I couldn't agree more, and I can't believe that billions of dollars are being spent in the electronic health records. It feels like we have to, every time we go to a doctor, every in every new doctor, I've got to fill out forms again with a paper and a pen. In the most advanced industry, and understandably so, and needfully so, the most advanced industry that exists, these people are doing brain surgery, yet I got to fill out a form with a paper and pen every single time I go to a new doctor.
And
it frustrates me.
I can tell you that the quality of the records that you would maintain would be one hell of a lot better than the quality of the records your doctor maintains.
Amen, brother.
Because you care a lot more about your health than the doctor does.
Exactly. And our health evolves, right? Like, they may have records from like 5 years ago, and they may still be kind of leaning on those. That's not accurate. In a lot of people's case, a lot of people's health can change in a day, in hours, right? So I feel like there's a lot of room for innovation. Elon Musk, are you listening? He may...
No, he's in his submarine, I think, right now.
He's in his rocket to Mars, man. We need somebody. I think we need something like that to happen because money. I think it all boils down to money. It's the same reason, like, and I'm not to get on a soapbox here, but the whole drug industry, they're in cahoots with doctors because there's a lot of money to be made. When maybe a home remedy would be a lot more effective and a lot healthier. I just feel like there's a conspiracy there.
Yeah, that's true. But what you have to do is there's a whole lot of money to be made anywhere and everywhere. So Clayton Christensen in The Innovator's Dilemma talks about, disruptive technology. This has been co-opted and in the popular vernacular, disruptive these days just means I'm going to get big, screw you. But he had a pretty specific definition for it. A really good example is, Bobcat versus Caterpillar. Caterpillar made these giant bulldozers, and every year they made them bigger and bigger and bigger until your average Caterpillar bulldozer weighs like 40 tons and it's the size of a house. And Bobcat came along and they said, we're going to build a little tiny bulldozer that's smaller than a compact car. And Caterpillar looked at them and from on high and said, ha ha. Oh, we don't want that stupid little business. You're going to sell that thing for $15,000. We sell ours for $1.5 million. Why would we want that? Okay. Well, it turns out that a lot of people just want to dig a ditch. They don't want to move a mountain. And Bobcat had this huge success. Caterpillar, by the way, bought Bobcat a few years ago. And they created a whole new segment, you see, by doing things differently. And the thing about making money is it's not about making money, and it's not so much about risk, because there's always risk. I mean, who took the bigger risk? Did Caterpillar take the bigger risk by not getting into tiny bulldozers, or did Bobcat take the risk by getting into the tiny bulldozer marketplace? You see, it's about individual managers. An individual manager has a choice every single day. A business executive has a choice every single day, which is they can do what they did yesterday, yesterday they made a good profit. They had happy clients, happy employees. Everything worked fine yesterday. So if they do it again today, there's a very, very good likelihood that they're going to have a similar success. Or they can do something that they've never done before. They don't know if they'll make money. Because it's a new business, it's very, very much smaller than their existing business. So they know for a fact that if they do make money, they're going to make a lot less money. Okay? And they're going to take a risk. They might piss people off. They might upset their staff. Do they really want to do it? And good business people are paid to make money. They're not paid to take risks or to try new things. And they don't get rewarded. If you're going to take risks, you're going to have failures. So they don't get rewarded for having failures. They get rewarded for making more money. And so what good business people do is they choose. It's not about making money, because Bobcat made a shit ton of money. You see, It's about do we make money in the predictable, comfortable, conventional way we've always made money, which always feels really good. Every morning I get out of bed and I go, I got out of bed. That's good. It's
right.
And that's what these business managers are doing. And the thing is a well-trained business manager is one who's trained to predict the future based on the past and to continue finding the optimum course. Okay, well, the optimum course does not include innovation because innovation is not optimum. It's opportunistic and it's risky and it involves stepping into the unknown, which is, so it's
right.
like innovation and business are mutually exclusive things. And so, but the thing is we all know that innovation makes money. You see the dichotomy? This is why when you look at making money as an objective, it's too coarse of a, it's like when you're looking for a date, you don't think human. You think man or woman or something else, but you don't think human. It's too coarse of a metric.
Oh, man.
And making money is too coarse of a metric. You have to say, do I want to make money by innovating, which is ugly and messy and means going down market? Or do I want to make money by being conventional, which is orderly and normal and incredibly risky because you're exposed?
You just triggered a question that I really didn't plan on asking you, but and I'll be honest, defenders listening, this is kind of a bit of a selfish question, but I have a feeling it's going to help you as well. Speaking of the dichotomy between innovation and making money, I am in the midst of trying to get a project greenlit. I thought of this project, believe it or not, I thought of this project nearly over 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. And I've been trying to get this project greenlit for 4 years. And I've got a blessing. I've had a blessing 4 years ago, but there's always been, and granted, there's been really good business reasons why we've had to kind of postpone building this thing. We rebrand, we made an entire new product that was more important for our business. But I'm at a place right now where we're at it again. We're trying to get this thing greenlit. It's been validated by the audience that is intended on using it. The management has validated it that we need this. The pushback we're getting right now is from engineering. And it's from the kind of the analysts, like the business analysts on the engineering side, are doing a cost-benefit analysis, which is important. I totally get that. But the problem is they're doing an analysis on a product that does not yet exist. That their only analysis is based on how long it takes somebody to manually produce this thing now physically rather than using a digital medium, which is what I'm trying to do. So my biggest challenge right now is trying to convince the business side and the engineering team that there's a lot of unforeseen profit in this right now, that you're just analyzing this through only what you know now. Every single disruptive quote unquote software product that's been released that's changed people's lives and really radically innovated on the business side, they didn't have anything to analyze against. What do you say to me, and what do you say to designers that are in the same situation where they know this product is going to produce a yield, but they just can't prove it yet?
Yeah, it sucks to be you.
Thank you.
Let me just say, as a guy who has never actually had a job in his life and has never really worked at a big corporation, and even all those years that I worked for myself, I still never once won the Employee of the Month award. You didn't
get the close parking place?
You're just wrong to ask me for job advice, because my advice is really bad. I would say Molotov cocktail. I would say burn the place down. That would be my advice. Here's what I would do if I were you, and really do not take this advice. This is bad advice. Is what I would do is I would say, I'm doing it. And I would go and I would hire a couple of engineers, because the engineers are giving you pushback. They don't want to be on board. They don't want to play your game. So don't try to convince them, because trying to convince people to do things is a losing game. It never works. So don't. Okay. So instead, go hire a couple of young, starry-eyed engineers who don't know they can't do it, and let them do it instead, and start building it. And one of two things are going to happen. Okay. Either Either the people who think they have decision-making capabilities are going to freak out and fire you, which is a fine thing because then you'll know. Or what they're going to do is they're going to stand back and say, let's watch him hang himself with all that rope he's got, all that rope he's taken, you know. Or in actually in the software world, it's let's see if he can shoot himself in the foot with all that rope, and do it, and just do it. And the thing is if you're right, you're going to have a success, and everybody's going to be happy. And if you're wrong, status quo ante, okay? And if they fire you, then you know that they were never going to say yes. Do not take that advice. And if you do take that advice, you fool, do not tell anybody you heard it from me.
This isn't being recorded, so it's all good.
No, that's it's like close this book at once. It's nothing but a pack of lies.
I like how you put the medical disclaimer out there, so that's fine. So, Alan, Apple made a mouse that you can't use while it's charging. I can't press 1 for English if I'm using FaceTime on my MacBook because Apple never provided a UI for that. Spotify's UX has historically been one giant disparate fustercluck. Now let's not even get into some of the software Microsoft has pooped out. SharePoint. Alan, why are there so many bad products in the world, especially at the enterprise level?
Well, because it's hard. It's really, really hard to make good products. And the reason why it's hard is not because it's hard to make good products, but because people don't really want to make good products. That isn't what, the people who want to make good products there are people out there who want to make good products, but they're not in a position to make good products. The people who are in a position to make good products, they don't want to make good products. What they want is they want to get promoted to VP. Okay? And the things you have to do to get promoted to VP do not include making good products.
It's so weird.
It's
messed up, man.
If you look at, so the how can I say this? It's so you can make a shit ton of money by creating a food-like substance that doesn't taste good, isn't nourishing, is destructive of the environment, wastes the soil, pollutes terribly, and destroys family farms and entire human ecosystems. It hollows out cities and towns. And you can make a shit ton of money doing this.
Microwave popcorn.
Well, pretty much. Go to Indiana and it's mile after mile of monocultured GMO corn and soybeans. But that's not the shocking thing, is go there after harvest and you'll find it's stubble. It's bare plowed dirt left that way for 6 months, which is like a lot like an open sore in the earth. And it's hugely degrading. But the thing is, people make a lot of money at this. Okay. Actually, people don't make a lot of money. The poor farmers in Iowa or in Indiana, they're suffering, but it's the agribusiness who owns them. They make a lot of money. But the point is that what you're saying is not why are there so many bad products in the world, okay? Because the answer to that is obvious, is you can make more money with a bad product than you can with a good product, okay? So the answer is the question is more subtle than that, which is why do we give money to people who mistreat us instead of giving money to people who don't mistreat us? That's the question to ask. And And that's a harder question. That's a much harder question because humans, the thing about humans, oh my God, we're human. And we misbehave, and we misbehave in the several, and we misbehave in the aggregate. It's so other people come along and they have no moral compass, and they say, well, let's exploit that. Let's exploit that willingness, and so it becomes it's a kind of a self-supporting duopoly. This is why I say the number one step is never, ever apologize for bad products. Always call, fuckery by its real name of fuckery. When the president lies, don't say he's challenged by the truth. Say he lies. The thing is that what happens is when you refer to things frankly as what they are, you other people who weren't aware of that begin to see it in that new way. I call it knocking on someone's frame of reference. As soon as you hear somebody knocking on your frame of reference, you now are aware of your frame of reference, and you can step outside of it until you hear a knocking on your new frame of reference. And then you step outside of that one. And it's frames of reference all the way out. And this is not bullshit. I mean, I am not a scientist, okay? But George Lakoff is a scientist. And you can go and you can read his books. I mean, he's a cognitive psychologist, and he's at UC Berkeley, and he's written a bunch of books about how people think.
I like him already.
And we do it by building metaphors. We build primal metaphors from this moment we're born, and we begin to build metaphors on top of metaphors. And so when I talk about frames of reference, really what I'm talking about are metaphors. And this is an actual fact. This is how the human mind actually works. And this is what interaction designers, by the way, need to think about. Not about empathy, but about George Lakoff.
This is Golden Krishna, and you're getting inspired by User Defenders Podcast.
It's interesting. I feel like as users, we vote with our wallets. And like you said, we will tend... We're kind of masochistic in a way. We'll tend to give money and continue to give money to companies that are producing software that's punishing us because we need the content, right? Like I talk about Spotify a lot, and a lot of defenders know that listening. But I like the content enough to pay them, $13 a month to suffer through the UI, to suffer through the disparate experiences across platform, across device. I'm willing to do that, and so many users are willing to do that. And so, right as of right now, Spotify has 70 million users voting with their wallet that tells them they don't need to change anything.
Yeah,
that tells them they don't need to make it better, and
right.
That sucks.
Yeah,
that sucks.
Well, there's the network effect, and some guy wrote a book called The Change Function, a guy named Coburn, I think. I read it a few years ago. And he talks about the...
Pip Coburn.
Yeah, people will change, but they have a natural reluctance to change because change takes mental effort. Okay, and it's also a commitment for even more mental effort and for unknown things. It's the known evil is preferred over the unknown evil, and so he says that the perceived advantage of the new way has to clearly be better than the advantage of the existing way, and then people will change. It's. That's a problem that isn't tackled because companies like to do incremental change because it's much safer than doing big leaps. So what that means is that they don't actually ever come up with anything new. That's why they move the hamburger menu from the left side to the right side instead of coming up with a new mental model because they don't want to take that risk. And so, and this is why, Autodesk's software looks a hell of a lot like it did 30 years ago. Even though they should have shit-canned that mental model about 25 years ago. And the same thing with products, big products. All the big software is like that. I mean, Photoshop is another, poster child for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess it's hard. I don't know. It's
again, you can make a lot of money selling crap to people, and everybody is sitting there saying, how hard is it to change? Do I want to leave my social media platform? It's the network effect. Do I want to leave my social media platform where all the people I interact with socially are here to go to this new platform that has nobody on it? Do I want to move? And the answer to that is, of course you don't. So the new social media platform has to somehow bring your old social media platform along. And the only way you can do that is with massive amounts of money. And the only people who have massive amounts of money are not those little new companies, but the old companies. And if you, by any chance, do come up with a good idea and do begin to siphon off users from the big guys just come in and either clone you, buy you, co-opt you, or outright steal your ideas and just take your place.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as users, we're all pretty fickle, right? I mean, I was working at MySpace whenever Facebook started taking over the world. I was working there and I saw it all shut down. And the sad thing is there were insiders there giving news to TechCrunch. I found out that they were laying off 33% of the staff like 2 weeks before it actually happened on TechCrunch. But we saw it all coming, and it was really sad the day that it happened. Every time, we were sitting there, and anytime somebody got a call, because we never get calls that are dead. We're designers. We don't get phone calls. So whenever any designer's phone would ring, that would be them getting called into the office and let go that day. It was sad. But here's the thing. Facebook offered a better experience. And that's the truth. And I saw it coming. Like we still had Cold Fusion on the back end. We had a weird conglomeration of Cold Fusion and ASP, and it was always fighting with each other. And and it wasn't. We didn't move fast enough. And we were corporate. Fox bought us. And so that was another problem. You have a whole new layer. We weren't as nimble anymore. So, I mean, there's a whole lot. I could probably write a blog about, what went wrong there, but basically Facebook came along and they offered something that was more consistent, a better user experience. And they were patient. They were patient with, like you said, recruiting the people over. And now all of a sudden, just within a year, MySpace became an abandoned amusement park.
Yeah.
So we're fickle. We'll come, and I think the reason I'm still paying for Spotify is because there's just nothing better yet.
Well, that's just the point. Is that the change function was there? Is that Facebook offered a demonstrably better experience or value to the user, so they moved across. And so look, Toys R Us just went out of business, and the proximate cause for them going out of business was their massive debt. Okay, they owed a lot of money. Well, the reason why they owed a lot of money is because the corporate raiders came in and took them over and sold off all their assets and generating and took the money and then generated a huge amount of debt. Okay, and then they kind of walked away from the company, from the shell of the company, and the debt crushed them. Okay. Change the definition of debt to technical debt. You see, the engineers wanted to keep their technical underpinnings because they didn't want to undergo the pain and dislocation of rebuilding their back end. Okay, and why was that? I mean, I know engineers, and there's nothing in the world they love more than rebuilding their back ends, if you'll pardon the expression. And but the reason they didn't is because their comp was tied to not doing stuff like that.
I see.
So what happened is MySpace was Toys R Us with technical debt. But it's the exact same thing. It's people pulling the money out of the company and not reinvesting into it. Because if you're not working to put yourself out of business, you can bet that somebody else is. I mean, you constantly be having to reinvent, not products on the fringe, but your core product.
Yeah, and that was another mistake we made. We tried to be all things to all people. And so we started offering, we started trying to be Yahoo, and Yahoo wasn't exactly doing great at the time anyway. And we started trying to offer weather and horoscopes and, and local shopping options. And it's like, we totally got away from our core product, which was music. Yeah. It was undiscovered bands that were getting famous on MySpace, and we got away from our core as well, and that was a big mistake as well.
Well, the old saw still holds. If you're trying to be all things to everybody, you're not anything to anybody.
Sorry to cut in, Defenders. That seemed like a pretty good organic place to break until part 2 of this unforgettable interview with software alchemist and legend Alan Cooper. So the call to action today would be to make sure you're subscribed wherever you consume this podcast, especially because part 2 is coming very soon, and I want it to automatically appear for you and you don't have to search for it or go on a treasure hunt for it. So make sure you're subscribed. You can do that either by going to userdefenders.com/subscribe, or just search User Defenders in whatever app you listen to this podcast in, and it should appear, and you can subscribe there. So, yes, it's going to be dropping soon. It's believe it or not, it gets even better. So, stay tuned for that. Tweet those takeaways. I'm at User Defenders, and Alan is at Mr. Alan Cooper. I want to thank Eli Jorgensen for the astonishing and inspiring artwork. He really captured Alan's essence, I believe, in the detail of Alan, especially in his face and his characteristics, and he's so awesome. So thank you, Eli, if you're listening to this. He's incredible. Check out his artwork as well. He sells it on Etsy. Userdefenders.com/Eli will point you to that. Thanks Adobe XD for sponsoring this episode, and Defenders, thanks for being there. Thanks for listening to this and talking about the show on Twitter, and it always pumps me up when I see that the show is benefiting you, and what the labor of love here that I'm doing is making an impact on your life. So really appreciate you. And until next time, until part 2 of this inspiring episode, fight on, my friends.